the prelude to the big conversation later. Hi, Chris, how are you? Hey everyone, this is so nice. This is Gloria. I'm Salamishah. We're really honored to be with you all this afternoon. How does the format of, I know I got very detailed.
I think it's the bravest one who will start first.
Okay. Cool.
So who's going to raise their hand?
Okay, so when you raise your hand, if you say your name, something about yourself that you would like to share with us and what grade you're in, that'd be great. So I know your hand is up, so.
I can start. My name is Naya Saker. I'm a senior here at MKA. I didn't really have time to think about a fact about myself. I mean, I have 4 fish. Okay, now.
That's great. And no bicycles.
Yeah. And my question is, who are the women in your life that inspire you currently, and who inspired you to do the work you did?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I was always reading, so they were all authors, I think, and I just, I read Little Women, and and I was inspired by that. I think I didn't understand that you could be inspiration in some way other than being an author until I was quite old. I just wanted to be a writer.
Okay, well, in that spirit of writers, one of Gloria's good friends has been a long-term inspiration for me, Alice Walker, in addition to Gloria, of course. I think my sister, who's an ongoing collaborator of mine, her name's Scheherazade. And then just like people I've had the honor of being mentored my entire life, a woman named Farrah Griffin, who was a professor at Columbia, but she taught me at Penn. And I would say my kids really are like my, as I'm seeing if they have food right now, but my children really are ongoing sources of inspiration. So I have a 2nd grader in the primary school, and his name is Sydney. And I have a 6th grader in the middle school, and her name is Seneca. And so they kind of breathe new meaning into my activism and into my writing. So.
I'm Maggie. And I have a dog my entire life. What would you say is one of the most pressing issues at the moment, and how are different ways that we can get involved?
Well, I guess the most pressing issues are all the adjectives that divide us. I mean, or try to divide us. We arrive on this earth as each of us is a unique human being who could never have existed before and will never exist again. And yet we have gender and race and class and nationality to divide us. And those are made up, actually. So, and yet they have such power. So it's up to us to undo the power.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at different moments, I would say different things, but I guess the biggest challenge is it's like a really small thing that ends up being a huge thing. So as children, you either learn to share or you learn to hoard your resources. And if we're living in a time where people actually don't feel like there's enough on the planet to sustain all of us, when in fact there is, right? And so how that disparity continuously gets played out in politics, in war, in reproductive rights, right? Like there's just not enough. People think that there's not enough, that we live in a moment of deep scarcity of resources when this is probably the most rich the planet's ever been. So I think that challenge our inability to share, our inability to redistribute resources, our inability to believe in things like reparations. I think that's some of it. But obviously, like climate change, I think is like the daunting thing for all of us. And again, our inability to believe that the planet deserves to be treated as if we want to live on it. I mean, that's like a fundamentally weird thing. And yet I think we treat it as if it's something just to step on and not to thrive in. So that's 2 big issues, I guess. Great. good questions. Okay, over here. And this side is really, this side.
Hi, my name is Christina. I'm a junior. And this question is a bit specific, so I apologize. But, were there specific instances where you had to adapt your communication and activism strategies based
Be a little louder, no? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Were there specific instances where you had to adapt your communication and activism strategies based on the geographical context or of the media environment of your locations?
Yes, I think there were a lot, actually. I mean, I was growing up in Toledo, Ohio, and going to a high school from which nobody went to college. I mean, they went to work in the factories, or the women went to work as cleaning women, and so on. And I knew I could go to college because my sister had gone, but I also felt kind of guilty, you know, because this wasn't shared with the people around me, so it made it more difficult to communicate. I solved this problem by deciding that I was going to get up and out of Toledo by being a dancer. This was completely impractical, okay? But it also kind of unified me with, you know, because I don't know how you feel about this, but show business was the only democratic thing we saw. So a lot of us thought we were mysteriously going to get up and out of our situation by singing and dancing, right?
So did you have to change, when did you realize that dancing wasn't gonna, is that when you arrived in New York? Or, no, we went to
No, well,
Smith.
I mean, I was able, for a whole lot of odd circumstances in my family, to go to college.
Yeah, to
So
Smith, yeah.
yeah, so that made all the difference. Then I just had to figure out how not to get married, because everybody in my generation got engaged and married right away. And so I went to India and lived there for 2 years. This was my solution.
I think it's a really good question to ask writers, because we're always trying to change language, change our strategy to appeal to different readers or audience members. And in our case, I think we write about really difficult topics. And so, like Gloria's written about lots of things, but one famously, and we'll talk about this later on, is, you know, having an abortion. I'm a sexual assault survivor, and I've written about that in different ways and different mediums. And so I think trying to figure out how to talk about difficult issues at the very moment that you're trying to also maybe encourage a reader to take this cause on as their own, or expose or educate people who may not be that familiar with these issues, I think requires both of us to, like, what verbs you're using, what story you're telling, what publication you're telling the story. So I think even on the most like basic artistic level, we're always trying to use different strategies. And that's also just different than like our political organizing, when you're organizing with different communities. As feminists, like sometimes you're organizing with people who don't even want to use the word feminist, or feel confused about what that means. So it has required us to be, and I'm speaking for you, but I'm sure, I assume this is this is maybe true, but it just requires a deep level of creativity, and also like a lot of improvisation, depending on who the audience is or who the community that you're organizing with. So.
Yeah, and I would just add that the most crucial thing is listening. You know, because that's how you discover whether you're communicating or not, and who the other person is. And, you know, if we just remember to listen as much as we talk, and talk as much as we listen, it makes a huge difference.
My name's Izzy Lawyer. I'm an 11th grader at Montclair High School. I want to major in marine biology, and my question is more for Ms. Steinem, if that's okay. You are portrayed by on many different TV shows and movies. Do you feel that that's an accurate representation of how you are?
No. No, but
What's your favorite and least favorite representation of you?
oh God, I don't know. I'd have to.
Well, hopefully the Gloria movie is your favorite.
Yeah, no. That there is a movie called The Glorious, which is like you know, which was really the most thoughtful, I thought. But it's it's very bizarre. I mean, there's no way around it. I mean, it's can be hurtful and insulting, or you can feel understood, as in The Glorious. But it's just very bizarre to see this doppelganger out there, you know, that's pretending to be you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Eliana. I'm a senior. I was just wondering, having been like very active at a time where femininity was incredibly looked down upon, how did you kind of balance and come to terms with loving your femininity while also being taken seriously in the industry?
Well, the women's movement per se, or feminism or whatever, given my age, didn't exist when I was in high school and college. So I tried to do what everybody else did. I got engaged, you know, and I was trying to, but of course I couldn't go through with it. That's why I went to India for 2 years, right? So I think it's very seductive and normal and natural. We are communal animals, you know, we want to be together, and yet we're each of us also unique. So we're always, I think, trying to balance those two things.
I think I interviewed Gloria 4 times, and then we have a little book. Another question I asked her, I don't know if this is in the spirit of your question, but it's like becoming an icon at such a young age around the feminist movement, but then also like beauty as part, I think in a way you're thinking about femininity, but also like, what was that like with the Playboy bunny being the first famous article of yours?
Yeah, but that, I mean, if you actually ever worked as a Playboy bunny.
Yeah, which I have not, but yeah.
You discovered that it was all a con. I mean, you know, they cinched you into this costume that you was so tight you couldn't breathe, and they stuffed your bosom, and they put makeup all over you, and so, I mean, it just never had any reality.
Hi, I'm Jackie Lubitz, a teacher at Montclair High School. I was wondering, both in the present and historically, how much has fear been a factor in the decisions that you made here?
Fear? Okay.
Yeah, for both of you, but you know, in terms of maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, today, movements have changed, the idea of intersectionality has changed, so I wonder if that's been a factor, and if it has, how have you worked through that?
I mean, my fear was more of, given my generation, of getting married, having children, disappearing into somebody else's life and name and so on. So I didn't know what was going to, I was just rebelling for the moment, hoping that I could continue. And so you proceed. It isn't as if you say to yourself, or I didn't say to myself, this is where I'm going. It's just more like, I don't want to do this right now. So here's what and then you proceed by small steps.
Yeah, I think my fear, so I was sexually assaulted twice in college, and I shared my story publicly in the feminist newspaper on my college campus a year after I graduated. And the newspaper always dates me because it's called Generation XX, so you know, I'm Generation X. And sharing that story is like sharing my deepest, what would then at the time have been shame, or my most harmful trauma, through writing was really a big act of faith and release. But also I was terrified because for all the reasons why it's so difficult for rape victims to kind of share their story, right? Like, you're gonna be blamed, like no one's gonna believe you. like you have to deal with the repercussions of all of that. And then I had a really beautiful sister who the next year asked if she could document my healing process. And that then became the basis of our organization. But that moment of like being able to share my story with people and then having my sister take on the story and then other people start sharing their story. So it went from like a deep fear to like being part of a collective, which is the risk, but also the reward was really important. So I think that was the biggest risk for me personally, was to this come out as a rape survivor so publicly at such a young age. I was pretty much like 21, 22. And so that changed the course of my life and my activism. But you just don't know what it's like. Like when you wrote about having an abortion, you just don't know what the consequences of being so public with such a private experience is going to be. And so in my case, I was confronting the fear with the hope that like I could heal differently and also perhaps be part of a world that would look differently as a result of me sharing my story. So that's one way.
And in my case, I want to kill the two guys who dared to assault.
No, yeah.
I mean, it's just unbearable, right? And that's what causes us to create movements, to try to keep that from happening, right?
Hi, my name is Ella. Oops, sorry. Okay. My name is Ella. I'm in grade 11 at Montclair High School, and I was just wondering if there was a specific moment in either of your lives that sort of like led you towards pursuing activism like later, or if it was just something maybe you always knew you wanted to do or came like later in life.
Well, I think in my case, it was fleeing being engaged and getting married and going to live in India and so on. And it was close enough to the independence movement in India. So there was a feeling that if such deep, long kinds of injustices could be changed, if they could get rid of the British and challenge the caste system and do all of that, you know, that we should be able to do anything. I mean, it was so life-changing in my case just to be there for 2 years.
Well, the moment we became activists, so it's different than maybe our political consciousness.
No.
The moment we realized the world was a way and we wanted to change it. It's a good question. I think when I went to college, and I always tell this story, and so the person's here, so I get to thank them publicly. So the summer before my senior year of college, I went to an independent school. I went to Newark Academy, so a school nearby here. I lived in Boston for that summer, and Nicole is here, and so she gave me 3 books. Maybe there's more than 3 books, but she gave me a set of books to read. The ones that stood out were Alice Walker's The Color Purple, Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, and Malcolm X's autobiography. And just having those like 3 books this summer before my senior year in high school, like changed the trajectory of my life. It changed what I understood. Like I had a language for feminism. I had a language about like anti-racism. And then my senior year was when Anita Hill testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee saying that allegations of sexual harassment with Clarence Thomas. And then the spring of my senior year, the 4 LAPD officers who were accused of beating Rodney King were found not guilty. So I had this rich history in literature and in activism. I had a language to begin to understand what was happening nationally, kind of similar to if you read those books before, you know, the summer of 2020, you would look at the murder of George Floyd quite differently than maybe if you hadn't read those books, right? And so that was the beginning of the seeds of my activism that took shape really when I got to college and I was able to find communities to organize with. But I think similar to Gloria, it's like the word, the book, writing gave me a different way of seeing the world. And so when the world was becoming so complicated, and it always was complicated, but this is just my coming of age with Anita Hill and Rodney King, I was at least mentally prepared to understand part of what was happening. And then when I got to college, I was able to start organizing around issues of racism and sexism. So.
And it's such a great learning experience to be a writer because you can wander around asking questions, right? So when I was in India, I was trying to write about parts of the Gandhian movement, and I was very knocked out obviously with Gandhi and all of that. And I went to interview a woman named Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, a name that everybody should know, but probably we don't, because I was trying to write about Gandhi. And she rocked on her porch and listened to me for a long time, and finally she said, "Well, my dear, we taught him everything he knew." And it turns out that the women's movement, which was marching to the sea to get salt illegally and doing, contending with the British colonial system, that had been really the basis of what we think of as the Gandhian movement.
Sean Holder, I'm a teacher of English at Montclair High School, and I was wondering what you thought about feminism today, specifically with the trends that are going on with specifically hip-hop.
Can you speak up a little? I don't know if it's my ear or your...
I talk very quickly. All right, so feminism today, specifically with hip-hop, generational feminism, Brittany Cooper, as well as other trends that are going on.
Feminism today.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the radical idea that we're all human beings, so it's, we can call it feminism, we can call it humanism, though I guess that means we don't believe in God, right? But I'm not sure. Anyway. It's a racial liberation movement, it's, it's all about our right and ability to be the unique person we are without these adjectives and groups and so on. And we all learn from each other in that way. I mean, for anybody to be in a group of people where anybody else is trying to express themselves is contagious. And it's a gift.
Well, I love Brittany, who's a friend and colleague of mine. So Brittany Cooper and Joan Morgan, I guess, when Chicken has come home to roost, like coining the kind of concept of hip hop feminism. I think we're in a really interesting moment, right? So like there have always been, and Gloria talks about this, and women of color at the center of feminism, and yet oftentimes when we think about the feminist movement, we don't think of them. We think of it as like only Betty Friedan and a particular kind of middle class, white, bourgeois movement. And so what's interesting about today is like there's no way to actually have that stereotype anymore, right? Like the people who are discussing feminism, who are in conversations about what feminist liberation should look like, it's really diverse, and it always has been, but I think we're in a different moment where we can acknowledge and recognize the contributions of women of color at the forefront or alongside, as opposed to trying to like figure out where they were historically. And I bring up Gloria because like Flo Kennedy is one of Gloria's like famous friends, famously a friend.
Do you know who Flo Kennedy is? Florence Kennedy was a great civil rights lawyer, and how can we explain Flo?
I don't know. You go ahead. She's so dynamic.
We were speaking partners for years, but anyway, Florence with a Y, Kennedy. You can find her. She was, she was just breaking all boundaries as a lawyer, as an activist, as a speaker. So she's a great teacher.
So I guess I bring Flo up, and we can. There are many other people, but they were always part of this moment and movement of feminism. But I think now we can at least see the diversity that's at the core of feminism, as opposed to like forgetting those people, right? And so, and when you bring up hip hop, like, you know, I'm a hip hop head. I don't think I'm a hip hop feminist. I think I'm a little bit that generation, like I said, with like Alice Walker and Toni Morris. Like, I came of age at that particular moment, so that shaped my feminism. It also shaped my criticism of hip hop too, right? Which is full of contradictions and full of paradoxes, and yet that's the music of my generation. And so how does one find themselves in a musical form that sometimes doesn't like you back, right? And so that's, I guess, part of the challenge of hip hop feminism is like they're trying to work through what Joan says is like the grays in working. But thank you for that question. I think it's really nice to have. So.
This is our generational difference, because
like,
I was not into hip hop feminism. I wanted to be a rockette because I thought it would get me out of Toledo and into the hearts of Americans.
The Rockettes. Yeah. That's great. Yes. Oh, you have one. Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Scarlett. I'm a junior here at MKA, and I was wondering, what is the biggest piece of advice that you've ever received that's helped you move forward in your line of work? And if you have any further advice for us, obviously as young people, as future change makers, you know, in the line of feminism.
Well, I'm not sure that this is but what comes to mind when you say that is that to remember to listen as much as we talk and talk as much as we listen. Now, in my case, I knew how to listen very well. I wasn't so sure about talking. And if it hadn't been for Flo Kennedy and Dorothy Pittman Hughes and other people, women of color in those cases, who not just encouraged me to go out and speak, but we went out as speaking a kind of sister act, right? Right. I never, ever, ever would have done it, ever, because people, at least I became a writer, so I didn't have to talk.
It's an advice that I don't know if it's been given, but I've observed it and heard it. And it's an interesting thing to share, because as like a woman of color, like, you're not given a lot of credit for your contributions, so there's that truth. But the advice I will say that I do pay heed to is like, you actually can get a lot of stuff done if you don't need credit for it. Meaning, like, there's so much about organizing and so much about sharing of power and so much about collaboration and coalition building that if you don't have to be at everything that you do, you don't have to get the credit for, you can actually make a lot of change. And I think some people who know me, like, sometimes I'm operating in, like, you know, a byline, and sometimes I'm operating in a stealth way, just because I think you sharing, again, back to this idea at the beginning, is like, or collectivity is actually kind of where I operate from. The advice I would say is, you know, the 20-year-old me would not have imagined the trajectory of healing, of being part of communities. And so I always say, like, things change, things will get better, and trust that path and that arc a little bit more than you would know at like 16 or know at like 13 or even know at 20. And so it's a weird thing to say, but I didn't, you know, I was in the heart of my depression, and I had to like trust a lot of people's faith that tomorrow would be better than the day before. And so it's just a kernel of wisdom that I think when you're in a difficult situation, it's hard to have faith, but sometimes you may have to rely on the faith of others to just get you to that next moment, and then ride that as long as you can until it becomes yours. So, yes, you have the,
Yeah.
Okay, both of you have questions, so whoever wants to come.
Hi, my name is Jonah Hecht. I'm a sophomore at MK, and my question is, in your opinion, what role can men play in furthering the cause of feminism?
Talk up other.
I'm sorry. In your opinion, what role can men play in furthering the cause of feminism and gender equality?
I think whatever it is that allows us to get rid of adjectives, right? There's no such thing as masculine or feminine. We're each a unique human being. So if if you are being your own true self, it's contagious. And if you listen, especially to women or other groups of folks who didn't grow up as you have, it blesses the whole idea of listening, and it honors the person who just because you are listening to that person. So these are all very revolutionary building blocks. And for instance, the fact that we're sitting in you're in a semicircle, not in a hierarchy, is already a plus, right? That hopefully you feel that you can speak up and say, no, that's wrong, or that's bullshit, or you should feel free to say that, right? Means that we hopefully can communicate with each other. This is a moment in time which has never existed before and will never exist again, and however it is that we can each use it in the most authentic way is what gives its power.
Yeah, I mean, it's so pretty, so thank you. It's really moving. No, it's so nice. I would just say that I have never thought of feminism as a movement or a word or identity that excludes people. I've always thought of it as a very open-ended, anyone can claim it, anyone can be it. It's not gender specific. So I think it's a pivotal role that boys and men can play, should play, have played in the progress of the feminist movement. I hope to be raising a feminist son, and I spent a lot of time hoping that he is, and maybe seeing if he is. So I just think there's like endless possibilities, and also I hope that you feel like it is an open, there's a space for you to be, for all of us to be part of it, because for us not to be part of it is a big challenge. Like the more people who are feminists, the better the world will be. And so that's how I see the role. Like it's that there's not a hierarchy in that sense, or one shouldn't feel like they are not included in it because of their gender or their class or their racial identity. It is supposed to be an open movement. And if it isn't, then we're failing. So the Academy, yes.
My name is Noah. I'm a sophomore here at MKA. So throughout everything you've done so far, is there like one thing that stands out as the thing you're most proud of?
I don't know, getting out of Toledo. I'm not trying to cast any, but in terms of in my life, managing to live my life without ever having a job, which was a lesson I learned from my father, who had 2 points of pride. He never wore a hat and he never had a job, by which he meant he kind of was always working for himself somehow. I never had to, there's nothing wrong, obviously, with going to an office or a factory for every day, but it didn't feel right to me, and somehow I managed to live a life in which I don't do that. I travel, or I work at home, or I do whatever it is that I do, but yeah, I guess it's about being free, and whatever that means to you, it means something different to each of us.
I would say, it sounds really old-fashioned to say, but choosing to be a parent, actually, as a feminist, as a black woman, raising black children in our country, making that decision, having the right to make the decision with my body. So I do think like that choice, and then the people that appear, and Gloria talks about this often because of the way she was raised, but that they're souls that we're just allowed to, how do you say it so poetically, when children are born and then their spirits are like how you grew up religiously or spiritually?
Well, the women in my family were all theosophists. I don't know if that means anything, but anyway. And the belief is that we arrive in this world as a unique human being, as I was saying, somebody who could never have happened before and could never happen again. And our task is to develop that in ourselves and support it in everyone else.
Yeah, so this being able to have these two souls that have arrived in my life and trying to figure out their journey and support them, I think is like the biggest, like I always say that they're the most important people I will ever meet and have met. So I think that's
great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they feel that way, but I do feel that way. And I'm like, so, but thank you for that question. One more, okay. Well, there's a lot. So what if we get them all and then we can answer? Like, just say them quickly. 1, 2, 3. Well, you asked the question already, though, didn't you? Okay, so sorry, but I think can we just get a new one back there?
Totally fine.
Okay, and then here. Okay, so just ask your question and we'll answer as quickly. We'll ask them all and then we'll try to answer.
Given how the feminist movement has changed and evolved, where do you see it going in the future?
Okay, where the feminist movement is going in the future.
With the recent overturn of Roe v. Wade, how can we take steps forward in fighting for abortion rights?
Okay, abortion rights with Dobbs. Okay, and then
With social media and fake news of online news, sharing news, how can we? I guess because there's often people trying to redefine the terms, and I think how can we push past people trying to push alternative and definitions on
all right, so that's it.
Salamishah?
Yeah.
One of my key questions to open up will be about Dobbs and the elections yesterday. So if you want to start talking about that, we will definitely get
Okay,
to that.
and you all will be there, hopefully. Okay, so social media, terms that are being used, villainized or weaponized, and how do you reclaim them or redefine them? And then future of feminism. So.
Well, the future of feminism is anything we please.
So that's good. That's a good answer. And unexpected, probably.
That's why you're not allowed to film this.
So it's probably a good answer to her question too about social media. No.
Social media. Yeah, social media worries me because it's most comparable in my life experience to what the form of it when I was growing up was personality books. There were secretarial handbooks, that you have for dictation, and people would put one student's name on each page, and then people would anonymously comment on, on that. So, cute but knows it or something, I don't know. Anyway.
That's horrible. Okay.
And it was irresponsible because it was anonymous. And, I think I worry about that online, that people are irresponsible, cruel, fearful, whatever the problem is, because it's not attached to you, because you're distant, because you can't empathize on a screen or a piece of paper. We only produce oxytocin, which allows us to empathize with each other if we're physically present. So I worry about paper and screen and anything that interferes with that.
I would just say that we've both seen the power of social media as an organizing tool with Me Too, with Black Lives Matter, with Arab Spring, and we've also seen what happens when one person buys a social media platform and has really different politics than, let's say, the freedom of other people. So that's the kind of moment we're living in, where we benefit from the organizing that took place over the last decade. And then we also see how precarious or vulnerable social movements are when it's only happening on social media. And none of those movements did, but it does make me value old-fashioned local organizing or old-fashioned grassroots organizing, that you actually need both, that you can't just live in social media, that to actually have change always requires these conversations, these gatherings, these consciousness-raising circles, and people protesting in the streets and writing petitions. So the things, the tools of social change, which we thought maybe social media could be the vehicle of, it's only a percentage of it. And so, and I think for your generation, have come of age with these massive social media movements, social justice movements happening online, it's also been exciting to see people really like have to return to like the way that Gloria organized or the way that maybe I organized in the 90s. So it's just, reliance on it, but so much because it's also part of vulnerable, depending on who owns it.
Yes, who can think of all the people who don't have a computer, who can't afford a computer. I mean, the biggest goal to me is inclusion. And that's the most obvious democratic tool that we have. And technology is exclusion in many cases.
Yes. Yeah, I think we're ending now.
Okay.
We're going to break now, and students, you're going to stay here, if that's okay, and with the teachers and with Ms. Israel and Mr. McLean. And we've got food for you, pizza, and some other things, and just some talking about, deconstructing what just happened.
Okay, that's so nice.
Yeah. Can we do one photo with...
Just say they have come around. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. Guys, come around. You got it there?
Hold on. Just about.
All right, guys, hold up. Move over closer this way. Come over this way. Dave's going to get a video real quick, and then I'll take the photo. Y'all come on closer to him. Come in closer. This side there. All right. Everybody wave. Wave a little bit. Wave. Y'all, hey, here you go. He has the video. I'm going to do it still. Look straight here.
All righty, thanks.
Y'all can make noise. Ready? Do it again. This is video. I'm going to do it still. Make some noise. Ready? Go, guys. Y'all rough. All right. Stay right there. Don't move. 1 second. Good. Stay there. Y'all got to have some fun here. Ready? Stay right there. Don't move. Guys, give me something. Ready? Have some fun. Ready to go. Pose. Yeah, it is.